Welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. We always talk about breaking down the silos of education and being able to learn from each other. And today I have two guests, Tom Woelper and Camp. I've just met him, and I love that he just goes by Camp. So first off, welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. So the reason we brought them on is we wanted to hear from the independent school market. These are the schools that if you're in the public schools, if you're not even involved in education, I'm just going to give a little bit of the landscape of what independent schools are, because there's obviously the public schools that people are familiar with around the country, and it's typically, like local, and then there's some schools that are charter schools in certain states. But this independent school market really operates where it is independent, and you'll get some that are the high end, kind of more traditional schools, but you also get some variety here. So Tom, Camp, I don't know which one you guys want to join. Can you give an overview of what your school is like when you talk to people and you say, this is what our school is?
Sure, I can jump in there. And when we give our elevator pitch to describe who we are, we say that we're the first of our kind, 6 through 12 day and boarding school that uses human-centered design to teach empathy as a foundation for innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. And kind of to your point, independent schools can be a mission-driven schools. And so we can start with that guiding star of our mission and then design our program and our curriculum backwards from that kind of mission statement.
And when did you start the school?
We are now finishing up year 3.
Okay.
I like to date the school from year 0 is when I came on board and had a chance to work with the founders to talk about that vision, and then went about the business of hiring the staff to come on board to write the curriculum and design the program. And so we opened in September of 2021.
All right. So we're always conversational based. So it's give me an idea of what prompted, why did the school come up? Because there's obviously, you have to have the funding, you have to be able to have a lot of the structure in place to just say hey, we're going to do a new school. What was the trigger?
Yeah. I think our founders fundamentally believed that schools today weren't adequately preparing students for this rapidly changing world, feeling that schools were stuck on focusing backwards. We're stuck in that factory model of education that's more about compliance and obedience and sitting in rows and doing things the way schools were done last century and maybe the kind of century before. And so they passionately felt that they wanted to be part of a conversation about where education can and should be going to prepare students for lack of a better word, for uncertainty. And our world is changing. We need to be flexible, agile. We need that innovators and entrepreneurs mindset and skill set to really navigate this rapidly changing world.
I always talk about how I spend my time divided. So I feel like half of my time is in the schools, education, conferences, talking to people in there. And then the other half is more with entrepreneurs, business owners. And I love the fact that I have kind of these two different things to be able to learn from and try to figure out what crosses over one from another. Obviously, a school like yours is looking at that and trying to figure it out. What, I guess from the founder's perspective of what was their background? Were they coming more from the education side? Were they coming more from kind of more the business entrepreneurial side?
Yes and yes. They are all connected by virtue of being educators and entrepreneurs. Their kind of primary visionary and benefactor was the daughter of educators, became a trained scientist, and has actually founded some schools in Hangzhou, China, has served on the board of trustees of some different independent schools. Another founder is a Montessori-trained educator who has a family business based in Massachusetts, a Siemens paper company, so brings that experience. And our third founder is a serial entrepreneur who's also taught entrepreneurship both at Babson College and Yale School of Management. So they brought that kind of entrepreneurs startup mentality, which I think gave us the kind of courage to really imagine what could be and not to be afraid to pivot and to iterate and to use that language of an innovator. But all the while, they also had a deep background experience in schools. And so I think recognized what was working well and what was not working.
Yeah. So at what point did the two of you get pulled in?
Well, Camp, I've been doing all the talking, so I'll let you jump in with our meeting story here.
Yeah, so I joined in February of 21. I think I was the first teaching staff member hired. And so Tom and I have been partners in this endeavor since that day. Like right away, as soon as I get hired, been working on what's needed. And one of our taglines at the time on billboards around advertising the school was "Where the school the world needs next," and I literally believe that. That's something I say. We're future focused, and where we aim to be relevant. And so, New England Innovation Academy isn't just like cool things being made in our makerspace. It's really like trying to think about how to be innovative and how you deliver material, how a student's experience is, how is that different from a student going through just a linear way through school. So Tom and I have been partners in all sorts of iterations and variations of that for 3 years and running. Like it's every day there are different conversations about how we can do things better and differently for that purpose, because we believe that we are the school the world needs next.
Awesome. Tom, talk to me from your perspective of like, when did you already know the founders, or what was that process that you got involved?
Yeah, I mean, if I talk about the school in terms of the years it's been open, the founders in year -1 met at a coffee shop in Cambridge and decided that they wanted to go forward with this concept. And they had been inspired by talking to the man who founded MIT's Integrated Design and Management program that brought together engineering and business and design. And that became part of the inspiration for a school around innovation and integrated learning. And they moved from that step to putting together a very small team to work on getting the right licensing and trademarking the logo and securing the campus all in year -1. And then, through a head of school search process, I saw this opportunity. I'm like, are you kidding me? You get to be the founding head of a school that is focused on innovation, as Camp said, on what's relevant and future focused. What a dream come true to be able to partner with such visionary founders and then have the task of translating that into, again, the curriculum, the operations of the school. And I've been in schools for a long time and get so struck by the cultural inertia of schools, where it's really tough for them to kind of move and pivot and change. And I know Camp often felt that he was one of the most progressive educators at all the schools where he had been working. You could only go so far. And I've been an academic dean at a long-established school, and just even changing the diploma requirements to involve some interdisciplinary learning was a torturous lift. And to be able to start a school where this was built into the culture from the very beginning was just so exciting. So I got inspired by their vision. And then, looking back, I wish, in some ways, I'm glad I didn't know then what I know now, just how much of a lift that was going to be in the middle of COVID. And yet every day has been exciting to work with such a great team who's also inspired by this work and to build something from the ground up.
So starting out, you have this vision for it. Now that it's up and running, can you just narrate what it would look like if somebody's walking into your school, and what that physically looks like that's different from what I would say most people know of more of a traditional school?
Yeah, I'll say when you walk into our school right now, we look like a startup business. Like it's a lot of glass. It looks very different from a school. And so that's kind of cool. There's like this aspect of like, we want people to be collaborative and integrative. So there's a lot of glass, there's a lot of movement. And one thing you'll see here is students smiling. Actually, we're pretty proud that our students are pretty happy. And that generally is because we work super hard to be flexible for many different reasons, for like adjusting the schedule because something needs to happen, or a student wanting to take this type of class. We're like, okay, let's figure out how to make that class happen, things like that. And so from the human-centered design model, we're always trying to listen to what the students need and what they're interested in. And then, like, my biggest thing always as the head of teaching and learning is like, okay, let's see if we can make that happen. How do we make that happen? Who can I drag in? Who can I partner with? Who can I collaborate with? And it's pretty amazing when you have that mindset. Actually, it's like Tom and I talk about this all the time. It's a mindset, like a flexible mindset. When you have that, rather than just being like, oh, I don't know if we can do that, blah, blah, like, no, let's see what we can do. Let's try to make this happen. It's amazing what you can do in a school when you have that type of mindset and other people who are willing to join you with that type of mindset.
And I'll jump in too. We have renovated what was a Verizon corporate training center that was built in the 1970s. So in some ways, when you drive up from the outside, you recognize some of the architecture as having been built in the 1970s, that we put in a new entrance. But what was great about a lot of buildings put up then, they were made with a lot of steel and not a lot of load-bearing walls. So we literally were able to go in and tear down all of the internal walls and put them back up where we wanted to. And as Camp says, it feels like a startup or an Apple store with the glass, which creates a sense of connection and reinforces a sense of belonging and togetherness, to quote one of our pillars, where I'm more likely to go look to talk to somebody than to send an email. We also have made sure that spaces like what we call our hub, which is our dining area, is not something that you lock off kind of between meals, which happens at many schools. The kind of cafeteria is open during meals and then closed later. It literally is in the center of the school, hence the name of the hub. And between meals, since we're day and boarding school, so we serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it becomes like your kitchen table with people sitting down and socializing, having an impromptu meeting, doing homework. And so there's a great sense and feel about the school too, that it's not this double loaded hallway with doors on each side that somebody said only prisons, hospitals, and schools are built with that kind of architecture, which reinforces that factory sense of education where you can't see people and there's no sense of community that emanates from the space. That's been something really powerful and exciting about the architecture of our space as well.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there, Kevin, about the architecture because it looks cool, right? It's a cool place. Like you pull up and like, oh, that looks really good. But like the cool thing is once you're inside, like we're doing the things that the space looks like you should be doing there. And so like my biggest thing that I always say is, we don't just think outside the box, we act outside the box. Like we don't want to be in a box. Like we want to if we want to be the school the world needs next, we can't be doing things that everybody's always done. And so not only does our school look that way, but it's almost like a daily challenge to like make sure you're being innovative, make sure you're thinking about what's relevant and future focused, because that's what we believe students need. And that's what we're trying to nurture and teach students to be able to do so they can go out there and lead relevant lives.
So talk to me a little bit about, because you had to market this at first. So being able to sell, like really talk about this concept, like who was, if I just talk business, who was your target market? Like where were you going to say like, oh, were you going after, and I don't know if I even want to make the assumption, going after the parents first or going after the students? Like what was that approach to say, if we're going to build a school that's totally different, where do we start?
Sure. I'll kind of jump in and Camp can kind of tag team in as well. First, even though I think our founders found this campus first, it probably could not have been located in a better place for a school like ours. I remember in our pre-launch year, in year zero, an article came out, it might have been in Forbes magazine, that said Massachusetts was the second most innovative state in the union behind California. And where we are right on the intersection of the Mass Pike and 495, there are a ton of corporate headquarters, biotech companies, technology companies. And so this is kind of a hub within the state of Massachusetts for a lot of businesses that are very kind of innovative. And so we kind of reflect that in our local kind of business market. But I think even beyond that, so I think many others have shared this idea that schools maybe weren't really preparing students for this rapidly changing world and weren't as forward focused as they would like. But I think also, as Camp said, a lot of this while we are developing an innovators and entrepreneurs mindset and skill set, we're really looking at innovative practices within the classroom and across the school. I think for many students and families, traditional school just wasn't working for them. And that was amplified by COVID, which again, that was our pre-launch year when we're selling the school. The parents looking over the shoulders of kids on Zoom screens and maybe seeing a lot of rote learning or the equivalent of worksheets. And I think that led them to be that much more dissatisfied with what they were seeing. And so the promise and vision of the school of looking to be relevant and future focused, more innovative in its kind of pedagogy, I think landed with a lot of those families, even if they weren't thinking about needing, again, that innovators and entrepreneurs mindset and skill set, which we passionately believe everybody needs, not just those who want to go into the innovators or entrepreneurs.
So did you feel like the students that were coming in had that mindset already, or did you have to? Were they, because most of them probably came from a very different environment. Was it hard, or did they come in like eager and be like, all right, I'm ready for something totally different?
I would say yes and no. Like, we clearly attract people, families and students who want something different than the traditional model. And that's what we advertise, right? So you definitely have those people, but then you also have the people who think they want something innovative in non-traditional. And then they get in, they're like, wait a minute, where's the AP this? Where's English class? Those types of things. So then it's just like constant, like, relations and talking about what it is we do, like staying strong to what it is we do and why we believe it's right, and supporting and explaining why this is the right way. So it's a little bit of a mixture of that. But in year 3, I would say we're definitely now attracting the people who are like, they understand what we are and what we're doing, and they want to be part of that.
So go ahead now.
And I'll give one other example. And we've worked on some of our own kind of vocabulary or kind of nomenclature. We don't talk about homework, but learning extensions. We're very mindful of the research, the notion that, doing, 2 to 5 hours of homework at night and sitting up till 2 a.m. as this bizarre badge of honor about that being a rigorous academic experience is something that we have eschewed from the very beginning. And so we really have looked at the research. We've looked at, we've reinforced a philosophy that the core learning, the heavy lifting should happen when the students are at school. And while our students do have work that they do away from school in their learning extensions, we worked really hard to make sure that's not overwhelming. So as our students have passions and interests, they also have time to develop them outside of school. At times, families go, oh my gosh, my child doesn't have 3 hours of homework and my neighbor's child does. Are they falling behind? Are they learning? Is this rigorous? So we have moved to use the word vigorous instead of rigorous to try to describe what we are doing. So there needs to be some ongoing kind of education as to what we are doing. As Camp said earlier, our kids overwhelmingly are happy. We're mindful of the mental health crisis that's endemic across school-age children across the country. And we aren't seeing students who are stressed out. We aren't seeing students who are anxious because of a hothouse school experience that's exacerbating, those tendencies.
So, and you have the boarding school component to it too. What's the mix of boarding school versus what do you call it? If it's just like day school? Is that yeah?
Yeah, right now we have about 29 boarders and about 90 plus day students, and that ratio might evolve and change over time. We've hit some important milestones this past year. We went through our accreditation process with the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. We've wrestled with the American government, and through the student exchange visa program, we can now offer visas for international students. We've had our first college outcomes, which we think altogether will help families who might have been a bit nervous about a brand new school see some of those external markers and validation of what we are doing. So that's my long way of saying I think we're going to see more students from across the country and across the world be interested in joining us. So our boarding population will likely increase as a percentage of our overall enrollment.
What does capacity look like for you?
We could ultimately grow to be a school of I think 350 to 400 is what we are looking at as the ultimate goal. And we wouldn't need to add any more to the kind of academic and residential footprint.
Okay. So I guess I would love to hear like what's a day in the life in student. I mean, you call it human centered. We use the term all the time, radically student centered. Like what does that look like? Like what in practicality when a student, like what does a day look like for a kid?
So the one thing about our like daily experience is it's not radical in that, a student comes in and they're in like a studio all day long. Like they're still taking classes, but sort of like the classes and how we do them is unique. So for example, we have a required class called Innovation Studio. That's basically like a design focused class where they're learning all sorts of maker skills and design skills. And that's required here, right? So that like as again, an innovative school, that's an element that like no other schools wouldn't require that. That's an elective. Then the other thing, as Tom mentioned earlier, we very value integration. And so we teach integrated math as a subject, integrated science as a subject, and humanities, which is the merging integration of basically English, ELA, and history. And so what integrated math, integrated science mean, I'll use science as an example, is traditionally you would be in a bio class, then a chem class, then a physics class. At NIA, we spiral those. So each year, a student is in a science class that's thematic based, and they're touching on both physics, chem, and bio in that class. Like that's all part of the curriculum. And so by the end of your time at NIA, you will have had the equivalent of a full year of biochem and physics, but you will have done this in this integrated approach. So how a student goes about their day definitely feels different in that the content is very non-traditional in that aspect. So and in addition, we're very flexible. So for example, I just got a message today as the head of teaching and learning. I'm always like, oh, what do you need? What can I do to help you? And so we had a class that is doing a project, and they're like, oh, all of 10th grade, we'd like all of 10th grade to be able to do this integrated project. And I was like, no problem. We'll just reconstruct the schedule for the entire morning for just 10th grade. And so then they go do it. And so that type of freedom and flexibility to be able to be like, not be siloed and be like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do if that 10th grader is not in my class this day, is really freeing, and it allows students to actually lean in and do the different things they need. So that's what I would say. Like it looks like this. If you looked at our schedule, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's a regular sort of schedule. But then it's like actually what they do as part of their day that I think is what we're doing that we say the students need next.
And I'll kind of jump in there. As Camp said, it's a regular schedule with kind of different scheduling blocks, but we have a 7-day rotating schedule. So in a given day, there are no more than 4 class periods in a day of either 65 minutes or 85 minutes. So there's been some real intentionality about the number of transitions a student has in the day, because research shows that if you have a 7 or 8 block day, which many more traditional schools have at 45-minute or 40-minute classes, it's really tough to transition in and out of a class and to have to take on 7 or 8 different subject matters in a day is just really hard for cognitive overload. So there's been some real intentionality about the number of transitions and some longer blocks for learning, and even the fact we have a 7-day rotating schedule means that on a Tuesday afternoon it's a different class period that ends the day. So if we've had students who need to get off campus to go to an internship or to do some other work that happens every Tuesday, it's not hitting the same class period week on week. And it just reinforces our ability to be flexible because we recognize that some of the really powerful learning opportunities might happen outside of the classes that we are offering. We want to make sure that we are open to the students having those opportunities.
That's really cool that you can have that perspective and be able to start from scratch and try some different things like that. Were these things that you had thought about in previous experiences? Like, man, if I get a chance, I would love to try doing this. Or were there other schools that you were looking at that had similar models that you're like, oh, I want to learn what they're doing and try applying it here?
Yeah, I would say there's a bunch of different things here where it's a mixture of that. But like, I'm going to talk right now about my favorite things, which is our competency-based assessment system. And it's actually, I call it a mashup. How we assess students is a version of mastery-based, traditional grading, standards-based. And so all what we have is really our own system where students are assessed, like, say they were taking a math quiz. You could still take a math quiz, but rather than getting a B at the top of it, you actually are getting feedback and assessed on different skills, which we call competencies. And those go throughout the year. So that's a very different model in terms of how our students experience their relationship with grades. Like, those competencies do compute to a course grade, but a student does not get a grade on each individual assessment they take. And having been teaching for a long time, you get students who like get something back and they get a B or a C and like, oh, that's so traumatic, when we all know it isn't. But the way we do it is by focusing on skills and breaking any assessment into those parts. It definitely de-emphasizes the grade element and emphasizes the learning element. And so that's and the cool thing about us, again, as a brand new school, we're allowed to do things that maybe some other bigger schools right now couldn't do, like a public school might not be able to be like, we're going to break right now where everybody's going to do a competency-based system. But we're fortunate at starting as a new school is we could set up this system that's built on research and planning and experience, and we all do it. So every teacher at the school does the system. So we have the common language among teaching staff. The students are all assessed the same way, and that's beautiful. I can't stress enough how great that is, and that comes from Tom mentioned earlier, like, at every school I've ever been at, I've been doing these types of things. Sometimes they were frowned upon. Sometimes they were like, what's that crazy guy doing over there? But really not really understanding that this is really what is needed for students to learn better. And so we at NEAR, we're able to do these experiments and iterate. I'm not saying, whenever I present about our competency system, I'm not saying like, hey, everybody, we got it down. We're, the absolute geniuses. Like, not at all. We iterate it daily. I just had a conversation earlier today with a couple of teaching staff members about, we got to think about how we word that competency better so the students understand it, those types of things. So that to me is super exciting. And again, that's a yes, we can do that because we're a new school, but it's also like rooted in all sorts of experience, my experience and my colleagues' experience as we collaborate on these things that we want students to do and that we feel like is necessary for the school that we want to be. I'm sure Tom has many examples of that question.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump in even as I talk about the school in terms of year 0 and year 1. Part of year 0 was using a human-centered design process to help build some of the foundational concepts of the school. And what do you do is step 1 in a human-centered design process is that you interview the key stakeholders. So we spent time interviewing students and parents and teachers to get their feedback as to what they would want to see in their school experience, and then also identified some different exemplars and experts that were out there too. But I think a lot of the team that we attracted here felt a similar frustration that I did about the kind of glacial pace of change, the ability to again, we keep using the language, relevant and future focused in the program. And so by bringing together a team of educators with different expertise and experience, we were able also to bring on our team a lot of that expertise. And as Camp said, I think our superpower has been really internalizing human-centered design, not just as a process, but as an ethos. And so we do use the word prototype and iterate, and we see everything we do effectively as a prototype. Whereas in many schools, you get these kind of sacred cows and you can't change something because it's going to offend this person or it's always been that way. We very much feel that we need to take in feedback in real time and then adapt and adjust. And so a lot of where we are now is a function of prototyping and iterating and really internalizing that mindset.
What you're doing sounds like all the things that I hear in the conferences of like, we need to go to more mastery base. We need to be able to do some of these, changing more of the scheduling around so that you can do that, and less homework. Those are all the things that I feel like in a lot of ways have become like common knowledge but it's really hard for them to actually like implement it within their system.
And I think, again, the fact that we're new has made it possible for us to build that in from the beginning. And it's almost like, a kind of paradigm shift that you start tweaking around the edges. It's tough to do any one of those things if you're not changing everything else at the same time to a brand new model. And I imagine that's why it's so difficult for some other schools to fully go there, because you need a different schedule. Frankly, as we said, the architecture of this school reinforces our pedagogy and our culture. And you need to do competency-based approach, and you have to adjust the homework or the learning extensions. That those all reinforce each other to create the school culture that we want. And to just do one of those pieces without changing the rest means you're just chipping around the edges of that old paradigm.
So hearing you guys talk, it's reminded me of a scene in the documentary Most Likely to Succeed. Have you guys seen that one that came out probably like 2016-ish around there? That I felt like made the rounds and tried to get people thinking of like more project-based learning and having more of a lot of the, like some of the things that you're putting in there. And the scene that just always sticks with me is when they're talking to the students and they're talking about like, what do you care more about, the learning or the grade on there? And pretty much every one of the kids still would come back to be like, oh, I care about the grade on there. Are you feeling the shift? Like, is that something that is just like really hard to beat out of the generation because they just expect school and they want to get that feedback? Or what's the general sense of the students?
That's the rub there, right? That's a deep cultural effect of how school has been run. So we in our competency system, like I said, we're sort of in the middle because we do de-emphasize grades on any individual assessment, but they do still get a letter grade for their course. And so there again, kids are still worried about that course grade and still talking about that. But it happens so much less when you do it the way we do it, where they're not talking about it every single time they get something back. And so it's super frustrating to me. If me, Camp, from the I perspective, if I could run a school and not do grades, I would do it. But unfortunately, the culture is so steeped in that we've wrestled with, actually, you know what? We have grades, but the way we do it at least makes me feel a little bit better mindset-wise that we're moving the needle towards that way of de-emphasizing how important, quote, a grade is. And the big thing for us is that our system, again, by focusing on the skills and the competencies, it helps take away, grading is subjective. We call it, I don't even let people use the word grading, it's assessing, but assessing is subjective, right? When you're assessing something, but by focusing on all these different skills, it does help take away the subjective nature of assessing a student's work because you're focused on all these individual skills. And if I just say quickly, like, I'm a big Patriots fan. And so seeing after the NFL draft, all the pundits coming out with their grades, right? They use their grades for the Patriots draft, B plus, literally based on nothing, by the way, right? They're not following a rubric or anything. And that's sort of the mindset of how grades work. Like people just think like, oh, B plus, and that's what that means. We're trying to work on how do you arrive at a more authentic version of that grade that this culture is obsessed with and our educational system is entrenched in.
So just a quick point to jump in. I forget where I was reading this article that was reminding that it was some Yale president back in the 18th century that brought the modern or the American grading system or birthed the kind of American grading system based on what the Oxford Don's done. And it literally was to rank and sort the kids. That was the purpose of it. And then over time, those four categories were given kind of different letters. And as Camp said, it's basically meaningless, except that students internalize, oh, I'm a straight A student or whatever that might be. And again, a very neat story. We started not giving any grades, and we got some pushback. Some from our parents who were really nervous about this. And again, we're an independent school, so we have to keep our families enrolled in our school. And even some colleges that at first were like, basically, we're not going to spend all this time looking at your portfolio or reading narratives to try to decipher what a NIA student is all about. And so in short order, from like October to January camp or something that would have taken years at previous schools, we had to find a way to translate our competencies and keep the integrity of that. As Camp said, on no assessment is a grade given, but had to find a way to translate that so there could be a shorthand that external constituencies could understand. Understanding what the typical college application reader spends 5 to 6 minutes looking at a college application. I might be off by a minute or two, but not by much. And if they can't easily understand where that student lands, it might be flipped over and that student might be passed upon. And so those were some compromises we had to make at the beginning. And I think we've done so in a way that preserves the integrity of our assessment system while also recognizing some of the realities that if you're too far out there, the rest of the world may not understand who you are. And we would never want to disadvantage our students as they look to go forward from NIA afterwards.
Yeah, I think your answer had this baked into it, but I'd love to hear some more clarity on it too. Do you think it's all college that's driving it? Like obviously the parents and the students, there's some like internal stuff there, but if you took that college as like the end goal of like, this is like, did they actually care about grades or assessment, or is this all wrapping right back up to this level of like, it's because it's the college system?
I would say the college system has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, a student's transcript in some way has become like the record of who they are, which is insane. But again, like our reason for keeping the integrity of our competency system to have grades was that so our transcript would look like every other school. Because again, most of the way we currently, although we will celebrate, Tom says this all the time, we'll celebrate the first graduate who goes to start their own business and doesn't go to college. Like, we're going to be okay with that. But most students still want to go to college. And so what we wanted to do was have them, when they get to college, when the application gets to college, on the front is a transcript, looks like every other transcript. And then we just want the person to be able to turn the page and then see all the cool things they've done at this school. And so if that transcript looks the same, we're giving our students the opportunity that it won't be pushed aside because it's like this crazy new school that they don't know about. Like, oh, this is a transcript, looks like every other transcript. Then you turn the corner and be like, oh, you did integrated this, or did a passion dive about this thing, that sort of thing. So while, yes, I do think college is still the driver, that's still, again, mentality-wise of how the system's entrenched and how much of the educational world is framed. And we want to honor that for our students who really want to do that. As much as we want to honor the students who want to take a gap year, or a student who wants to be like, you know what, I'm going to go try to start my own business.
Yeah.
And I think also, you mentioned this before, I think parents, even as they're excited about what NIA is and represents, also are pretty conservative. And I know my sister is also an educator. I use this phrase that I have borrowed all the time, saying every parent thinks there's an expert on education because once upon a time they went to school.
Exactly.
And so I think we also have to continue, hopefully, to have some of the outcomes that we're having. And then over time, maybe we'll be able to go back and not have grades, but we have to bring the families along as much as the college system or the college admission system is very traditional and wants things in a certain format.
And I know a lot of the people who have listened to these shows in the past, I feel like people have classified me and my approach as anti-college. And I want to clarify, I'm not anti-college. What really frustrates me is how much the college admission process is framing the entire K through 12 school experience in this country. If we're all just really honest about it, whenever we're critical about the K through 12 system, it's a lot of times it's because they are being dictated by the college admission system. And from my point of view, I'm like, that's what sucks. Like if we're going to really tackle this, is why like everything that they're doing, literally starting in kindergarten, sometimes even earlier, is framed by, well, this is going to look really good to get into college. And then the parents and the students kind of just follow that lead. And I do think there's a level of the parents maybe dictating it. but it's a conversation to me that has to be had. Is like, as a parent, I'll say as a parent of 3 kids that are, like the oldest is a sophomore in high school down to an 8-year-old. I don't want their experience dictated by what their opportunities are going to be when they're 18 or 19.
Yeah.
I want them to be well-rounded, good human beings. And with that, they should have a lot of opportunities to go to college if they want to go to college.
And maybe to add to your point, another piece I've always found to be so kind of ridiculous is this notion that students should be equally excellent in every single discipline area of the curriculum. Because in reality, when you go on in life and your work and other things, you end up having a passion or an interest or an area of expertise, and we're more spiky as an individual, as much as we want to work on being well-rounded. But students in a more traditional setting panic if they get a B- in one of those different academic areas, and maybe that's not where they're as strong or as interested, and that should be okay, because welcome to being human and not being equally expert in every single area. But our college system, and probably particularly for most selective colleges, want to see you being kind of expert in every area, and that's just so unrealistic.
Yeah.
So anyway, to just add to your point.
Yeah, and I don't know where it is other than having the conversation. I think parents, I think there's like the door is opening a little bit where parents are starting to look at that, but there's still a lot of just kind of that fear out of parenting, or that competition. Like there's so much that I think is built into, and I think a lot of it is just the parents and the generation age of parents. Like that was the route. It was like, you go to college and you can't have a good life, and unless you're at a college or at a better college. And I mean, I look at now from that 50% of my time that I spend with entrepreneurs and business owners, most of us do not care at all if you have a college degree. In fact, like there's times where I'd be like, you know what, it's probably, I want somebody who doesn't go that traditional route. And again, not to say that you don't learn a lot in college. There's a lot of value in the classes and being around people their age. And it's a lot of just coming of age that happens in that. But and maybe I'm the outlier, but it doesn't feel like it. It does feel like people like want to look at someone's LinkedIn profile or their portfolio and be like, that's the type of person that I want working. I don't care if you got a 3.8 GPA.
Right. Yeah. Now, I think you are kind of preaching to the choir here. And I know I was just reading an article recently but there's a college going out of business once every week, and just reinforcing how the value of a college degree and what that means in terms of your work opportunities afterwards, I think has shifted a great deal over the past decades. And there are different ways to present yourself as being kind of interesting and ready to go into the workforce. As you said, entrepreneurs aren't looking at 3.8; they're looking at your competencies or your resilience or your ability to fail fast and forward. I mean, all of those other soft skills or durable skills, as are sometimes kind of referenced. But I'll have to give my quick plug here. As you said, a different type of school that doesn't do APs, that focuses on passion and purpose and innovating for impact and ready for what's next, to summarize our kind of mission. It's resonating with colleges, even though you just talked about the college admission process. And we're graduating our first class of 15 students. I think we had confidence that they were going to have some wonderful outcomes. And colleges have been so excited about what we are doing and really cheering for us. I think because our kids aren't burned out, they are interesting, they are putting together a program of study that demonstrates deep passion and interest. And we've had it from large schools like Michigan and NYU have accepted our students, smaller liberal arts colleges like a Babson College, who we have a partnership with, focused on entrepreneurship, and Middlebury and Bucknell and Case Western, design schools like Savannah College of Art and Design and Parsons, a school like Northeastern that has a co-op program that reflects some of the internships that we do, Hampshire College, UVM. I mean, it's been amazing the range of schools, large, small, private, public, that have been really interested and excited in us. And I think we thought maybe some of the state schools like a Michigan or a UMass Amherst and others might be later to wrap their mind around what this brand new school is doing, but they haven't been.
Yeah.
Because I think our kids look different and are really interesting and are breaking through some of that, 6-minute read of the application that I mentioned, or having a transcript with all these AP classes that makes you look like every other kid at every other school.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That is all wonderful to hear. I love what you guys are doing. I love that that it's being well received by colleges. I do feel like, are we at that tipping point where some of this innovation and some of the real big changes that need to happen? So thanks for sharing what you guys are going through. I hope people that are listening have takeaways of how they can make those changes, whatever environment they're in, whether they're in a district or school or or even supporting the school environment. So for anyone that has any questions, we'll have your information in show notes. I would love to come see your school and just continue to stay in touch with you guys as you learn more and you continue to iterate your way through it. I love hearing when we're trying new things. I mean, that's really what it's all about. If we know the results we're going to get if we don't change it.
That sounds great. You are most welcome, and any of your listeners too. If you get our contact information in the notes, we love having colleagues and people visit the school.
Perfect. All right, listeners, if you had not already hit subscribe, go ahead and do that wherever you're listening. And betterlearningpodcast.com is our hub for everything. So Tom, Camp, great talking to you. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Cool.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right. The views and opinions expressed in the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and of my guest, and do not necessarily represent the organizations we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.